Hey, what's happening, everyone? Welcome back. And if it's your first time here, just plain welcome. I am not flying solo today because 2A Tuesday needs something a little more. We've got some weird things going on in Florida, ostensibly in the wake of the FSU shooting, but sort of not really. Um, and I am not a Florida guy. So I decided to bring in somebody who knows a lot more about Florida gun politics, and that is my friend, Luis Valdez. He is the Florida director for Gun Owners of America. Lewis, how the hell are you, man?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on the show. And I wish it was to discuss a far better topic than what we are going to dive into. But again, thanks
Absolutely.
for having me on.
Well, the for everyone else watching, Lewis knows what we're talking about, obviously. But uh, in the wake of Parkland, Florida did some stupid stuff, including banning the sale of long guns to legal adults under the age of 21. For the last several years, there's been an effort to try to roll that back, and we got word that that's definitely not going to happen this year. What gives?
Well, it's the third year in a row now that the Florida Senate, under Republican control, has killed legislation to repeal the part of the Parkland gun control. As you said, after Parkland, the Republican supermajority did a lot of stupid things. They did an under 21 purchase ban, mandatory waiting periods for long guns and handguns. They did a bump stock ban that is so erroneously written that it bans force reset triggers, binary triggers, and possibly even makes it a felony for you to get a standard factory Glock with a 5.5 pound trigger connector. It makes it a possible felony to put a 3.5 pound connector because you're increasing the rate of fire. And on top of that, we have red flag laws. Florida, in reality, is the worst Republican ranked state when it comes to gun rights.
Yeah, I've referred to it as the most restrictive pro-gun state in the country.
That's a very good way to put it because that's the honest truth to it.
Yeah, it's I've had people tell me before, "Hey, this is the gunshine state," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's pretty dark there." I,
Yeah. The issue in Florida is you have a Republican supermajority in name only because a good segment of either the Republican leadership or lawmakers are basically Democrats who swapped out their jerseys for Team R to run on a Republican ballot, very much like what Michael Bloomberg did back in the early 2000s when he was running for mayor of New York City. He knew that it was going to be a contested race as a Democrat, so at first he ran as a Republican, since that was an easy campaign. And it's very similar in Florida. And part of it, too, is because even though Florida is a Republican dominated state, politically speaking, a lot of the voters are either politically uneducated or, in some cases, sadly, they're politically apathetic. And in the worst case, they're just fully on board with it. They are either former Jim Crow segregationist Democrats or they're Northeast Country Club Republicans who don't like the idea of the working class being able to own and access firearms. So they support anti gun Republicans to run in a number of races. And eventually they get into leadership positions, both within the party and within the legislature. And it's horrible.
yeah, I mean, you've got a committee chair, Pasadomo, I think's her name,
Kathleen Pasademo,
right?
she was the former Senate president for the last 2 years.
And uh, was part of the Republican majority that passed the Barkland laws, and she came right out and said that that's part of the reason why her committee was never even going to vote on lowering the age.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Well, what's even more ridiculous is the state's argument for the under 21 purchase ban is they keep pushing the idea that, oh, adults under 21 don't have the mental faculties to own and carry a firearm. Yet these are the same people that let a 19-year-old be a cop in the state of Florida, entrust them with a firearm, and to enforce the very gun control that they are pushing. So their argument is if you're under 21, you're too stupid to own and carry a firearm, but you're smart enough to be an armed agent of the state and enforce the very gun control that we want to have on the books.
I was going
You
to
know,
ask. I was going to ask what the entry age in Florida was for being a law enforcement officer because I know that's 19 here in Georgia, if I remember correctly. In fact, it was funny. I had a guy I knew, uh, second generation cop like yourself. he gotten on with the police department, and he went to go buy some ammunition before he took, you know, he went to the academy because he wanted to practice his shooting, and he was too young to buy ammunition at the time.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. They were going to give him a gun, they were going to give him ammunition, and let him enforce the laws, put himself in positions where judgment is key, and they trusted him completely to do that. We allow 18-year-olds to enlist.
17-year-olds actually.
Right,
Remember that.
17-year-olds with parental permission, absolutely. I joined at 19 myself. It We were considered capable enough to make that decision. We were considered rational enough to vote, to decide to get married, to, decide sexual partners. People are considered old enough to enter into contracts, to rent apartments, to do all of these things. And yet here we have a constitutionally protected right. And Florida, the gunshine state, is going, nope, 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 not for you.
Yeah. The worst thing is right now, the Senate sponsor of the repeal under 21 purchase ban bill, Senator Collins, who we support, but remember, we don't carry weight or water for any politician or political party. So under, our standing principle is confrontational politics. Lawmakers do good, we thank them. Lawmakers do bad, we spank them. In Senator Collins' case, he introduced the repeal bill of the under 21 purchase ban. We thank him for that. But at the same time, he introduced a bill that gives a carve out to cops for the state mandatory waiting period. Now, we're against that philosophically. Look, we think everyone, we think there shouldn't be a waiting period.
Right.
But especially in this case, we're against this bill simply because, philosophically speaking, armed agents of the state are not any better than any other Floridian. Why is it that a cop could skip the waiting period, but a domestic violence victim, for instance, can't? And the argument that's thrown at us is, well, they have better training, they have better this, they have better that. Look, I was a cop for 15 years. I'm a second gen cop. My old man did it for 35 years. I've heard every horror story you could think of and seen it from the range, where most cops taking them to the range is like taking a 5-year-old to the dentist. They will kick and scream, and they don't want to do it because most of them don't want to qualify. And it comes down to the philosophical principle of our nation was founded on the basis of egalitarianism and equality. We don't have knighted kings. We don't have nobility. We don't have rulers. We don't have landed gentry. Everyone is the same.
Yeah.
And introducing legislation that gives a carve out just because of your career is wrong. And
Yeah.
we told him very simply. We said, look, we're not against you. We're not against you. We're just against the bill. If you amended the bill tomorrow and it said, hey, domestic violence victims with an injunction could skip the waiting period. You know what? It's a small step, but it's a step in the right direction. We would support that.
And it opens it up beyond just law enforcement, absolutely. Because, you know, again, I'm the son of a cop.
Yeah.
I've spent time on the range with other police officers. Yeah, you talk about the training thing. I remember one competition I took part in, uh, relatively informal, but there was about 25 people, 10 of which were cops, and I outshot all but one. And I'm not bragging because I'm not that good of a shot. I'm just not. So, they're not necessarily better trained. And I remember you engaged with somebody on Twitter, or excuse me, X. I'm old, it's still Twitter. Uh, but they were like, yeah, why would cops need a gun? It's not like somebody might want to try to hurt them because of their job. And I find that kind of bullshit because they're issued a gun.
Yeah.
This is for them to be able to get their own firearm outside of their department. It's going to be a secondary firearm at most,
Yeah.
right? And it's this is not a duty weapon. It's not like they're going out and I've got to have a duty weapon because my duty weapon got stolen. The department will give them another duty weapon. Might spank them for leaving it where it could get stolen, but that's that's a different matter.
Look, back in my entire career, at no point did the agency tell me, hey, you can't carry your agency issued firearm off duty. And, the argument that some even made was, oh, well, this bill allows correctional officers to carry off duty. Under state law, correctional officers could already carry off duty. And on top of that, under federal law, they could carry under the National Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act nationwide.
Mhm.
So in Florida's law enforcement, whether they're a street cop, corrections, plainclothes investigations, they're riding a desk, they're a reservist, whatever, if they're sworn with an agency and they're armed, they can carry nationwide already. And on top of that, if they really wanted to skip the waiting period, they could do what every other Floridian does. They could apply for a concealed carry weapons permit that every John Q citizen has to jump through if they want to skip the waiting period. And the most egregious thing of that is the Florida Department of Agriculture, FDACS, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the agency that issues it. If you're a cop, all you got to do is show them credentials. You skip the line, they issue you the CCW right then and there. So it's this bill, in the grand scheme of things, does nothing for Floridians as a whole. Is kind of an insult to Florida's gun owners. One of the core components of the Republican voter base that puts people into power here in Florida. While at the same time, if this bill is advancing, because it's been heard in every committee you could think of, it's been voted favorably in every Republican committee. Its House version has already passed, but the repeal of the under 21 purchase ban, that's not even being brought up once in the Senate. What message does that send to Florida's gun owners as a whole?
Yeah, I know damn good and well what message I'm getting out of it. And you and I've had this conversation. I may be from Georgia, but I'm close to the border. I come to Florida pretty regularly. We met physically in Florida.
Yep.
So Florida's gun laws do impact me from time to time. And it's absolutely stupid that this is what you're looking at. You guys you've got a stronger Republican majority. On paper, you guys should have better gun laws in my home state of Georgia. And
On,
you've got
on
so many
paper,
things you don't have.
yeah, on paper, Florida should have better gun laws than the majority of the country.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is I've even spoken to the Republican Party chairman, Evan Powers, on this issue. And I said, look, why isn't the party censuring anti gun Republicans that are going against the Republican Party platform? And his response is, that's not my job. I'm supposed to support all Republicans, whether they're pro gun or anti gun, because they're part of the party. My job is to make sure that we have a Republican majority. And my response to that was, okay, so you welcomed someone like Representative Hillary Cassell into the party this past November. She's a long established anti-gun Democrat. She's down in South Florida. She left the Democrats because of their anti-Israeli stance, which, you know what? Hey, I'm not against her for leaving the Democrats on that. The Democrats are
Yeah,
supporting
valid.
terrorists. I'd leave if I was a Democrat. I'd leave them too.
Ain't that
But
the
his
truth?
but his statement was, I've known her for years. She's going to be a great part of the Republican Party. And my response to him was, dude, she is one of the most anti gun lawmakers in the Florida House. She's going to be horrible on gun rights. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. First thing she did when the under 21 purchase ban repeal bill was brought up in committee, she voted against it. And then when it was brought up on the House floor, she voted against it again, twice.
Yeah, with with Republicans like this, who needs Democrats?
Exactly. And
I
that's
mean,
the issue.
yeah, it is an absolute shame that you guys are dealing with this, especially something as egregious as an age restriction on long gun sales, because there's a federal restriction on handguns, which means that a 20-year-old living on their own who has is maybe getting threats, maybe has a stalker, has no avenue to purchase a firearm lawfully.
Yeah.
They can be given one, but that's not, if my rights depend on the actions of another, it's not a right.
But even then, there's a screw up with that. So an FFL cannot even transfer a firearm. So let's say It's your kid. You're a Georgia resident. You want to give your kid, let's say your kid claims Florida residency. Congratulations. That's an interstate transfer, which means it has to go through an FFL. So even if you're a parent that wants to give your college age kid a firearm because you live out of state, the FFL cannot release the firearm to your kid.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's yeah.
that's one of the biggest issues.
If you try to do everything above board, that's exactly what you're going to run into. You could probably get away with no. They owned it before they declared Florida residency.
Yeah.
But if you buy the gun after that point, you're kind of
Yeah.
that doesn't work. That doesn't fly, and it's insane because most homicide victims are under 21.
Yeah.
Right, and if my daughter goes to Florida, we mentioned FSU. FSU is a closer school to me than University of Georgia, which is my team.
Yep.
That's where I would love all my kids to graduate. But FSU is closer. If she were to go to FSU, get an off-campus apartment because, dorms are weird. Uh she cannot obtain a firearm lawfully.
Well, you brought up FSU, and here's a fact that a lot of people don't know about Tallahassee. Basically, half of Tallahassee is a gun-free zone because between FSU, FAMU, and TCC,
Yeah.
those three schools own a lot of property. So what people think isn't campus, it's actually campus because FSU has been building and buying up development and housing and apartments and land and just building like crazy all over town. So a lot of it is, you think it's a really swanky upscale college age apartment. It's actually owned by FSU, which means that even if they owned a firearm, they can't have it where they reside because it's a gun free zone, because it's part of the university property and it's part of campus. And guess what? A lot of the criminals in FSU know that. So all the places that they do burglaries, that they do rapes, that they do aggravated batteries, that they do aggravated assaults, all of that they know is they hit the college area, the college parts of town because they know their victims are going to be unarmed and defenseless.
And let's kind of bring this back to something I mentioned at the top of the segment, and that is FSU. They age restrictions and gun free zones. How did those work out last week?
This is the second time it hasn't worked out because if you remember going all the way back to 2013, you had the Strozier Library shooting
Hmm.
where one of the victims was a concealed carry weapons permit holder, and that person followed state law, voluntarily disarmed themselves, and the end result was the person couldn't defend themselves or the other people in the library got shot for it.
Yeah, and that's like I said, it's a damn shame. And if without that, what happened last week would probably look a lot different.
Yeah, and the worst thing about it is not one but two open carry bills were introduced this session. One was by Representative Joe Rudman, who was basically forced out of the legislature back in January. And to cut a long story short, he was going into a second term. He reintroduced our bill that we drafted, which included open carry, campus carry, and repeal of red flag laws. Uh, and when he was won re-election in November, the state house does a introductory organizational session right after the elections to basically set down the marching orders. And from what he stated is the House Speaker said there's going to be no Freedom Caucus in Florida. We are not the governor's female dog, but he said it in the far more vulgar way. We're not going to work with the Senate. We're not going to do anything. We are going to do what we want. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to really push any pro-gun bills. So Rudman, who himself says he's the second most conservative member of the Florida House, basically was forced to resign in protest, saying, "You know what? I'm not going to get anything done here. I'd rather go back to my practice as a doctor and help my community that way than just waste taxpayer dollars sitting in Tallahassee." So that bill he introduced was basically destroyed. And the second bill was State Senator Randy Fine, who's now in Congress. He introduced the campus carry bill. Now, it wasn't as strong as Rudman's bill, but still it was a campus carry bill. And the committee it was brought up in, it was a Republican dominated committee. Two of the Republicans got up and left for that vote. So you had four Republicans, the rest Democrats, one sole Republican, Ileana Garcia out of Miami. She voted against it. And just recently, on social media, including X, she's proudly proclaimed, I'm glad I voted against the campus carry bill.
And two people are now dead who might not have been.
Yeah. And, and the worst thing is I lived in Tallahassee for over 10 years. My wife used to work at FSU. We know FSU like the back of our hand. There's a lot of people there that we consider very close friends and some we consider family. And when, the incident happened last week, the first thing that went into our minds was, oh my God, this literally happened in front of the building my wife worked at.
Oh, man.
And I know that area. I mean, I'm telling you, when I know that area, I know that area.
Right.
And seeing the footage is egregiously shocking because the shooter nonchalantly walks in the courtyard shooting at people who all they could do is dive for cover, when if these people were able to have been armed, they could have defended themselves, they could have defended others, and it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Gun control doesn't work. And look, I commend FSU PD for their quick response.
Yeah.
And I say this as a former school resource officer, but when seconds count, cops are minutes to an hour away. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we're first responders. We're not first preventers.
Yep.
We show up after the fact. The only way to prevent this is to let good people defend themselves.
Absolutely. I like to phrase it that cops will show up just in time to draw a chalk outline around the body.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that to disparage cops.
I know. I'm not either.
It's a harsh reality.
Yeah. Look, when I was an SRO, I literally pledged my life to the kids that were under my care. But even some of the elementary schools I worked at, those are fairly large campuses. It could take still up to a minute for me to get from one end to the other. And that's running at full speed, just because of how big some of these campuses are. And FSU is a city unto itself.
I've been on that campus, and I've seen maybe a 10th of the campus, maybe.
Yeah,
and I'm probably giving myself too much credit here. So it's a massive. People who have never been to a major university like that do not understand how large these campuses could be.
Yeah, it's not just one central building with a couple of buildings surrounding it. Literally, a lot of what is FSU today used to be parts of the city of Tallahassee that over 100 years, FSU has bought up and built up and developed and grown to where literally the entire road network within the university in of itself is confusing. And again, I commend FSU PD for as quick as the responses they did. But even when I've been on campus, I know how confusing it is because some of the roads just dead end. You have to go around. A lot of it over the years have been turned into parking lots, what used to be a thoroughfare and a throughway, or they just, over the years, hey, yeah, that was a roadway. Well, guess what? We built a mag lab, or we built an astronomical unit, or a nuclear science division, whatever. So they bulldozed it. They put a parking garage or whatever the heck it was. And it's literally that complicated of a place just to navigate normally. But then in the sheer size to get through all of that, when seconds are counting or ticking by and people's lives are depending on it, for people to be left defenseless, it is appalling for a lawmaker to go on social media and proudly state, yeah, I'm glad I voted against campus carry.
Yeah, it's asinine to me, and, folks who are seeing this in Florida, you guys are the only ones who can do anything about it.
Yeah,
Lewis is 1 vote, his wife is 1 vote. I'm not even a vote there, not lawfully, and not a Democrat, so I'm not gonna try to vote where I don't belong. But, you guys are the ones who put these people in office. You're the ones that are or and, some of y'all voted against some of these people because you saw the same things Lewis is talking about, and if so, just talk about it more. Tell people what you're seeing, because the only way you're going to see results in Florida is by cleaning the Republican House.
it's not just the House; it's also the Senate. It's the entire
Well,
legislature.
this was lowercase house.
Yeah, yeah,
This was the lowercase house, not the uppercase.
yeah. Well,
But yeah, that's a fair distinction. If in case somebody did misunderstand, I think I'm just talking about how no, the age limit bill died in the Senate.
yeah,
It's a
it,
Senate
it
committee
passed.
that's not voting on it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it passed the House, and the biggest problem here is that, like Senate President Albritton, you go to his campaign website, he says, "Oh, I'm a defender of the Second Amendment." But when I
yeah,
asked him in person, "Where do you stand on open carry?" "Oh, I'm against that because my the sheriffs are against that," which is ludicrous because I've gone and talked to a number of sheriffs across the state. They're in favor of open carry. They're
and
in favor of campus carry. They're in favor of repealing gun control. So the idea that law enforcement themselves are against it, you just have these Republicans using it as a crutch.
exactly. So on that note, we got to wrap up because we are running longer than I normally do. Lewis, for the record, Lewis and I could talk about this for I don't know what about 18 hours straight. You know, we could do that. Nobody wants to watch that. Um, I mean, hell, I wouldn't want to watch it, but so. But Lewis, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Well, it's real simple. If you want to follow me on social media, it's real FL Gun Lobby. But more importantly, you could go to gunowners.org to join GOA. It's just $25 a year. Every penny goes towards the fight. And you know this. I don't fly around in a private jet. I don't wear a bespoken suit. I drive a clapped out 2011 Hyundai Elantra that has the window tint peeling off and the paint is faded and it's worn off in some
Yeah.
spots because every penny goes towards the fight. And the best way is, look, if you join GOA, you go to gunowners.org/join. It's $25 a year. You get up to the date information on local, county, state, and federal alerts. And more importantly, we tell you how to get involved. We tell you when we do gun owner lobby days, when we're contacting specific lawmakers, what legislation is important, what legislation is a threat to the Second Amendment, what legislation restores and expands the Second Amendment, and who and how to vote in key elections.
Yep. And kind of echoing what Lewis said about the not wearing fancy suits. A few years back, I teased Eric Pratt about how he was underdressed for somebody running a gun rights organization. Right about the time we learned someone else was wearing very, very nice suits paid for by the membership. Um, but Lewis, thank you so much for joining me, brother. It was good to have you. Hope to have you on again someday.
Definitely. And I hope next time I'm on is because we're actually talking about some good 2A victories in the Sunshine State.
That would be amazing.
Yep.
So, thank you again.
Always. And, thank you for being a shining beacon of freedom in these dark and troubled times and for the work you do. Because, look, our national motto says it best: e pluribus unum, out of many one. Together, you, me, your viewers, our members, everyone, we're what makes this country great and we're what's going to reestablish freedom across the land.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. All right, so you know what Lewis and I are thinking, but I want to know what you think. Go down in the comments and tell me what you think about what Florida is doing. And hey, are you dealing with something similar in your state? Let me know. And while you're down there, do me a favor, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell so you can be alerted when I've got videos out. I'm usually up 3 times a week, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. This past Sunday was off for Easter. And on that note, I am going to wrap things up and I will see you all in the next video.